On the morning of June 6, 1944, the shores of northern France bore witness to one of the most significant military operations in human history. Known as D-Day, the invasion of Normandy marked the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany's occupation of Western Europe. It was the largest seaborne invasion ever attempted and involved meticulous planning, immense courage, and a scale of human effort that remains honestly unmatched. Though the price of success was steep, the storming of the beaches of Normandy ultimately turned the tide of World War II in favour of the Allied forces. By 1944, World War II had raged for nearly 5 years. Germany had conquered much of Europe, and the Soviet Union was locked in a brutal conflict on the Eastern Front. The Western Allies, primarily the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada, recognized the urgent need to open a new front in Western Europe. Doing so would relieve pressure on Soviet forces and hasten the collapse of the Nazi regime. The Allies chose Normandy, a region in northern France, for their invasion. While the Germans expected an attack along the French coast, they were convinced it would occur at the Pas de Calais, the shortest distance between Britain and France. To maintain the element of surprise, the Allies launched a massive deception campaign known as Operation Bodyguard, designed to mislead German intelligence. Fake armies, false radio transmissions, and double agents all contributed to the illusion. The code name for the invasion was Operation Overlord, and the initial assault phase was called Operation Neptune. Planning had taken months, involving thousands of officers, engineers, logisticians and strategists. The Allies needed to coordinate land, sea and air forces across an international coalition. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, oversaw the entire operation. The landings would target 5 beaches along the Normandy coast, each assigned a code name: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. American forces would land at Utah and Omaha, British forces at Gold and Sword, and Canadian troops at Juno. The goal was to secure a foothold and link up the beachheads to enable a push into the French interior. In the early hours of June 6th, airborne troops from the United States 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, as well as British and Canadian paratroopers, were dropped behind enemy lines. Their mission was to capture bridges, disrupt German communications, and sow chaos. Many units landed far from their intended drop zones, facing disorientation and heavy enemy fire. Despite these setbacks, they managed to sabotage key targets and hold critical terrain until reinforcements arrived. At dawn, a massive naval bombardment began. Allied warships pounded German defences along the coast, hoping to soften the enemy's fortifications. Following the barrage, more than 156,000 troops began the Amphibious Assault. Each beach offered its own challenges. At the westernmost landing point, Utah Beach, American forces faced lighter resistance than expected. The 4th Infantry Division, supported by airborne units, quickly overcame German positions and pushed inland. The successful landing at Utah was partly due to strong coordination with the airborne units who had disrupted German reinforcements. Omaha Beach, in contrast, became a scene of brutal combat. German defences were strongest here, with high bluffs, concrete bunkers and interlocking fields of fire. When the United States 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions landed, they were met with withering machine gun and artillery fire. The first waves of soldiers suffered catastrophic losses. The tide and weather had scattered the landing craft, and many units landed off-course or without key equipment. The rough surf swamped vehicles and sank supplies. Despite the chaos, small groups of soldiers managed to find gaps in the German defences and slowly worked their way up the cliffs. Through sheer determination, they established a fragile foothold by the end of the day. British forces landing at Gold Beach encountered stiff resistance from well-prepared German defenders. However, with effective use of specialised armoured vehicles, nicknamed Hobart's Funnies, they were able to clear obstacles and advance inland. By nightfall, they had linked up with Canadian forces and secured a sizable area. The Canadians at Juno Beach faced a heavily fortified shoreline and rough seas that delayed their landing. The first waves took significant casualties, but the soldiers pressed on. Canadian units pushed farther inland than any other Allied force on D-Day, capturing several key towns and junctions. At Sword Beach, British forces landed in coordination with French commandos. Their goal was to move swiftly to Caen, a major city in Normandy. While initial progress was good, stiff German counterattacks, including armoured divisions, halted the advance. Though Caen remained in German hands, the beach was firmly under Allied control. D-Day came at a terrible cost. By the end of June 6th, over 4,000 Allied soldiers were dead, with thousands more wounded or missing. German casualties were similarly high. The beaches were littered with the wreckage of war-destroyed tanks, landing craft bodies and debris. Medics worked tirelessly to save the wounded, and chaplains comforted the dying. Despite the bloodshed, the landings were a strategic success. The Allies had established a firm presence in France and secured critical supply lines. Within a week, more than 325,000 troops, 50,000 vehicles and 100,000 tons of equipment had come ashore. In the weeks that followed D-Day, the Allies faced, well, some pretty fierce German resistance as they tried to expand their territory. The countryside of Normandy, with its hedgerows and narrow lanes, really favoured the defenders. The Germans used this terrain to slow the Allied advance. It wasn't until Operation Cobra, launched in late July, that the Allies actually achieved a breakout. American forces punched through German lines, while British and Canadian troops tied down German reserves. The capture of Saint-Lô and the encirclement of German forces in the Falaise Pocket, led to the eventual liberation of Paris on August 25, 1944. D-Day is remembered not just as a military operation, but as a symbol of international cooperation and sacrifice. Soldiers from more than a dozen nations participated in the invasion, united in the goal of defeating tyranny and restoring freedom to Europe. The success of the Normandy landings ensured that Western Europe would be liberated from Nazi control. It also ensured that post-war Europe would be shaped by democratic nations, rather than falling entirely under Soviet influence. While the war would continue for almost another year, D-Day was, well, the turning point. Today, the beaches of Normandy are peaceful. Cemeteries mark the final resting places of thousands who gave their lives. Memorials, museums, and commemorative events preserve the memory of what occurred. Visitors from around the world come to honor the courage of those who fought there. Behind the strategic maps and battle statistics are the personal stories of those who lived through the invasion. Soldiers like Private John Steele, who famously dangled from a church steeple in Sainte-Mère-Église after his parachute got caught, became symbols of individual bravery. Medics like Corporal Waverley B. Woodson, an African-American soldier who treated dozens of wounded under fire, highlighted the heroism and often overlooked contributions of minority troops. And, women too played vital roles, serving as nurses, code breakers, and logistical support. These stories remind us that history is not just shaped by grand strategies, but by the courage, fear, and determination of individuals acting in the most extreme circumstances. The storming of the beaches of Normandy was more than a military maneuver. It was a moment that changed the world. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany and opened the way for the restoration of peace and democracy in Europe. The success of D-Day was built on the shoulders of immense planning, international cooperation, and above all, the courage of those who faced death to secure freedom for others. As the years pass, the memory of that day remains a solemn reminder of what was at stake and what was achieved. The beaches of Normandy may now be quiet, but they echo with the legacy of those who stormed them in the name of liberty. If you found this story meaningful, please like and subscribe to our channel for more history brought to life.